20 years. 7,300 days of waking up with that familiar knot in my stomach. Reaching for my phone and feeling that instant surge of dread wash over me. Living in constant preparation for disasters that never came, analyzing every conversation, replaying every interaction. My mind a relentless machine of worst-case scenarios. I became a master of high-functioning anxiety. Successful career, loving relationships, all the external markers of a life well lived. But inside? Inside was chaos. 3 a.m. wake-ups with existential dread, Sunday scaries that started on Friday, that constant feeling of waiting for the other shoe to drop. I tried everything. Cognitive behavioral therapy helped me understand the patterns, but didn't touch the core. Meditation apps gave me temporary relief but never addressed the source. Medications managed symptoms while the root cause remained untouched. I was treating anxiety like a broken part that needed fixing, a malfunction that needed correcting. Until one afternoon, reading Jung's Man and His Symbols, I encountered a single line that shattered everything I thought I knew about anxiety. Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. In that moment, I realized I'd been asking the wrong question for 20 years. Instead of, what's wrong with me, the question became, what's trying to emerge through me? Instead of fighting my anxiety, I started listening to it, and what I discovered changed everything. My anxiety wasn't a disorder. It wasn't a chemical imbalance. It wasn't a genetic curse I had to manage forever. It was my authentic self, trapped inside a life that wasn't truly mine, screaming to be set free. In the next 18 minutes, I'm going to share the one simple shift that ended 2 decades of suffering. Not managed it, not coped with it, ended it. You'll discover why every approach you've tried has only touched the surface, how ancient wisdom and cutting-edge neuroscience reveal anxiety's hidden purpose, and the exact reframe that transforms your greatest source of pain into your most trusted guide. This isn't about techniques or strategies. This is about fundamentally changing your relationship with anxiety from enemy to ally, from problem to pathway, from pathology to purpose. But here's what I need you to do first. If you've been struggling with anxiety for months, years, or decades, and you're ready to discover what it's actually trying to tell you, hit that like button right now. When you like this video and engage in the comments, you're training YouTube's algorithm to understand that you value deep, transformational content over surface-level quick fixes. The algorithm learns that you want videos that actually change lives, not just entertain, and it will work in your favor to bring you more profound, healing content like this. And most importantly, stay with me until the very end, because I'm going to give you the exact integration practice that seals this shift permanently. A simple daily method that transforms anxiety from your greatest enemy into your wisest teacher. This practice has helped thousands of people not just manage their anxiety, but completely reframe their relationship with it. What you're about to learn isn't just anxiety relief. It's a complete awakening to who you truly are beneath the fear. Your anxiety has been trying to save your soul, and it's time to listen. Let me take you back to where this all began, because I need you to understand that what I'm about to share comes from the deepest trenches of this experience, not from theory or secondhand knowledge. I was 7 years old when anxiety first introduced itself. Not the normal childhood worries about monsters under the bed, but this pervasive sense that something terrible was always about to happen. While other kids played, I was calculating risks, scanning environments, my nervous system already locked in survival mode. By college, this had evolved into full-blown panic attacks. I remember sitting in a psychology class. The irony wasn't lost on me. Feeling my heart explode in my chest, convinced I was dying while the professor talked about normal stress responses. I became an expert at excusing myself from situations, at creating elaborate backup plans, at living a carefully controlled life designed to minimize triggers. But here's what's crucial to understand. I was incredibly successful by external standards. Graduated with honors, built a thriving career, maintained loving relationships. I became what I now recognize as a high-functioning, anxious person. Someone who achieves despite their internal chaos, often because of it. Anxiety became my fuel, my perfectionism, my driving force. Yet every night I'd lie in bed with my mind racing. Every morning I'd wake up already braced for impact. Weekends felt like borrowed time before Monday's inevitable return. I lived in a constant state of, what if? What if I said the wrong thing? What if I failed? What if people discovered I wasn't as capable as I appeared? The therapeutic approaches I tried were like putting band-aids on a severed artery. Cognitive behavioral therapy taught me to challenge anxious thoughts, but new ones would emerge faster than I could challenge them. Mindfulness meditation gave me moments of peace, but anxiety would return with doubled intensity. Anti-anxiety medications took the edge off, but I felt like I was living my life through frosted glass, present but not fully there. I spent thousands of dollars and countless hours trying to fix what I believed was fundamentally broken about me. I read every anxiety book, tried every technique, downloaded every app. I was treating anxiety like a computer virus that needed to be removed, a foreign invader that had somehow infected my otherwise healthy system. The breaking point came during what should have been the best period of my life. I'd just received a major promotion, was in a wonderful relationship, had achieved everything I thought would make me happy. But instead of relief, my anxiety intensified. I was waking up at 3 a.m. with this profound existential dread, this sense that I was living someone else's life, that I was trapped in a beautiful prison of my own making. That's when I realized something that changed everything. My anxiety wasn't random. It had patterns, rhythms, specific triggers that weren't about external circumstances but about internal alignment. The anxiety was strongest when I was doing things that looked right but felt wrong, when I was succeeding in ways that didn't honor who I truly was. I started asking different questions. Instead of, how do I make this stop? I began wondering, what is this trying to tell me? Instead of seeing anxiety as an enemy to defeat, I started approaching it with curiosity. What if this wasn't pathology but communication? What if my nervous system wasn't malfunctioning but protecting something sacred? That question led me to Jung's work on individuation, to Eastern philosophy's understanding of suffering as misalignment, to indigenous perspectives on illness as soul loss. And suddenly a pattern emerged across all wisdom traditions. Anxiety isn't just about fear, it's about authenticity. It's about the tension between who you are and who you think you should be. The moment everything changed happened on a Tuesday afternoon in my local bookstore. I was browsing the psychology section again, looking for yet another solution to my anxiety problem, when I picked up Jung's Man and His Symbols. I'd read about Jung before, but something made me open to a random page. There it was, staring back at me. Your vision becomes clear when you look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. I literally stopped breathing. Not because the words were profound, I'd read profound words before, but because something inside me recognized this as truth in a way that bypassed my analytical mind completely. It was like my soul was saying, finally, someone gets it. Jung was talking about what he called individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, rather than who others expect you to be. And suddenly, 20 years of anxiety made perfect sense. I wasn't suffering from a disorder. I was suffering from disconnection. Disconnection from my authentic self, from my true desires, from the life my soul actually wanted to live. This connected to something the philosopher Kierkegaard wrote about anxiety being the dizziness of freedom. That anxious feeling we get when we're faced with the infinite possibilities of who we could become, but we're too afraid to choose authentically. The shift was instantaneous and complete. Instead of asking, what's wrong with me? I started asking, what's trying to emerge through me? Instead of seeing anxiety as a problem to solve, I began viewing it as information to decode. Instead of fighting the feelings, I started listening to them. Modern neuroscience backs this up beautifully. Dr. Gabor Mate's research shows that when we chronically suppress our authentic self to fit in, to please others, to meet expectations, our nervous system goes into a state of chronic activation. We're literally living in a state of internal conflict, our true self trying to emerge while our conditioned self keeps it suppressed. Your nervous system isn't broken when you feel anxious. It's responding appropriately to an impossible situation. It's like trying to drive with the accelerator and brake pressed simultaneously. The anxiety is your authentic self trying to break free from the constraints of inauthentic living. Here's the simple shift that changed everything. I stopped seeing anxiety as my enemy and started seeing it as my inner compass. When anxiety spiked, instead of trying to make it go away, I would ask, what am I doing right now that doesn't align with who I truly am? What part of my authentic self am I betraying? The answers were always there. Anxiety peaked when I was in conversations where I wasn't speaking my truth, when I was pursuing goals that looked impressive but felt empty, when I was maintaining relationships that required me to be someone I wasn't, when I was choosing security over authenticity, approval over integrity. The ancient Greeks understood this perfectly. They spoke of the daimon, your inner calling, your authentic genius trying to express itself through you. When you ignore or suppress your daimon, you experience what they called divine discontent, that restless, anxious feeling that something is fundamentally wrong with your life. This is why all the anxiety management techniques only provided temporary relief. I was trying to silence a messenger instead of listening to the message. I was medicating symptoms instead of addressing the cause. I was fighting my own inner wisdom instead of honoring it. The moment I made this shift from resistance to receptivity, from pathology to guidance, everything changed. Not gradually, not over months of practice, but immediately. Because I wasn't learning a new technique, I was remembering a fundamental truth about what anxiety actually is. What I discovered through personal experience, modern neuroscience is now proving in laboratories around the world. And what's fascinating is how this cutting-edge research validates what ancient wisdom traditions have taught for millennia. Dr. Matthew Lieberman's research at UCLA shows something remarkable about authenticity and brain function. When we're living authentically, when our actions align with our values and true self, our brain's default mode network operates in a state of coherence. But when we're living inauthentically, constantly adapting ourselves to meet others' expectations, this same network becomes hyperactive and dysregulated. This hyperactivity manifests as what? Chronic anxiety, rumination, that constant mental chatter telling us something is wrong. Your brain literally knows when you're betraying yourself, and it responds with stress signals designed to get your attention. Dr. Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory reveals even deeper truths. Our vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve that connects brain to body, is constantly scanning our environment for safety. But here's what's crucial. This nerve doesn't just scan external threats, it's also monitoring internal threats, including the threat of living a life that doesn't honor your authentic nature. When you're chronically suppressing who you really are, your nervous system interprets this as danger. It's like having a smoke alarm that keeps going off, not because there's a fire in your house, but because there's a fire in your soul, the fire of your true self demanding to be expressed. This is why anxiety often intensifies during periods of external success. Your ego mind celebrates the achievements, but your deeper self recognizes the cost. The more successful you become at being someone you're not, the louder your inner wisdom has to scream to get your attention. Now here's where this gets profound. Every major wisdom tradition throughout history has understood this connection between suffering and authenticity, though they used different language to describe it. The Buddha taught that the root of suffering, what he called dukkha, isn't pain itself, but the misalignment between reality and our resistance to it. When applied to anxiety, this means the suffering comes not from life's challenges, but from living in resistance to our true nature. The Stoics had a concept called living according to nature, not external nature, but your essential nature, your authentic self. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rocky headland on which the waves constantly break. It stands firm, and round it the seething waters are laid to rest." That rocky headland is your authentic self, unmovable, unshakable when you know who you truly are. Indigenous healing traditions worldwide recognize what they call soul loss, the spiritual illness that occurs when we become disconnected from our essential self. Symptoms include chronic anxiety, depression, feeling like you're living someone else's life. The cure isn't medication or therapy alone, but what they term soul retrieval, reconnecting with your authentic essence. Jung synthesized these insights into his theory of individuation, the psychological process of integrating the conscious and unconscious parts of the psyche to become a whole, authentic individual. He observed that neuroses, including anxiety disorders, often emerge when this individuation process is blocked or denied. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, Jung wrote. But here's the paradox. The thing we fear most, full self-acceptance and authentic expression, is also the thing that ends our suffering. Jung's concept of the shadow is crucial here. The shadow isn't just our dark impulses. It's everything about ourselves we've learned to hide, suppress, or deny. This includes our authentic desires, our creative impulses, our real opinions, our true calling. When we keep these aspects in the shadows, they create what Jung called a neurotic split in the personality. Your anxiety often spikes precisely when your shadow, your suppressed authentic self, is trying to emerge. That social anxiety before speaking your truth? That career anxiety when considering a meaningful but risky path? That relationship anxiety when you want to be more vulnerable? These aren't disorders. They're birth pangs of authenticity. Modern research on career satisfaction and mental health supports this beautifully. Studies consistently show that people in jobs aligned with their values and authentic interests report significantly lower anxiety levels, even when those jobs are more challenging or pay less. Meanwhile, people in high-paying, prestigious positions that don't align with their true nature show elevated stress hormones and anxiety markers. The same pattern appears in relationship research. Dr. John Gottman's decades of studying couples reveals that relationships requiring significant suppression of authentic self create chronic stress responses. Partners who can be fully themselves with each other show much lower anxiety and depression rates. Even creativity research demonstrates this connection. Studies of artists, writers, and innovators show that periods of creative suppression correlate directly with anxiety symptoms, while periods of authentic creative expression correspond with improved mental health markers. Your symptoms aren't random. They're your psyche's GPS system, constantly redirecting you toward authenticity and away from self-betrayal. When you understand this, anxiety transforms from a disorder to be eliminated into wisdom, to be decoded. This is why the ancient oracle at Delphi inscribed "Know thyself" above the temple entrance. Not because self-knowledge was intellectually interesting, but because disconnection from your true self is the root of human suffering. Your anxiety isn't telling you that something is wrong with you. It's telling you that something is wrong with how you're living. Now comes the transformational part. How to actually make this shift from seeing anxiety as pathology to experiencing it as guidance. This isn't theory anymore. This is the practical application that changes everything. The first practice I developed I called the daily inquiry. Every morning before checking my phone, before diving into my to-do list, I ask myself one simple question. What wants to emerge through me today? Not what I should do, not what others expect, but what my authentic self is calling toward. Sometimes the answer is profound, a creative project that's been whispering to my soul. Sometimes it's simple, the need to have an honest conversation I've been avoiding. Sometimes it's unexpected, the urge to spend time in nature instead of forcing productivity. The key is asking the question and then actually listening to the answer. But here's where this gets really powerful. When anxiety arises during the day, instead of immediately trying to calm it down or think it away, I pause and ask, what is this trying to protect or reveal? This single question has become the most powerful therapeutic tool I've ever encountered. I remember one afternoon, feeling intense anxiety before a business meeting. Instead of taking deep breaths to manage it, I asked the question. The answer was immediate. I was about to agree to a project that would make me money but drain my soul. The anxiety wasn't random. It was my inner wisdom trying to protect my authentic path. When I listened to that guidance and respectfully declined the project, the anxiety disappeared instantly, not because I'd managed it, but because I'd honored what it was trying to tell me. Every evening I do what I call the authenticity review. I ask myself, Where did I betray myself today? Where did I speak my truth? Where did I choose security over authenticity? This isn't self-judgment, it's information gathering. I'm tracking the patterns between my choices and my anxiety levels. What emerged from months of this practice was a clear map of my anxiety triggers. They weren't random events or chemical imbalances. They were specific moments of self-betrayal, saying yes when I meant no, pretending to agree when I disagreed, choosing what looked good over what felt right. The second practice is what I call the authenticity audit, a systematic examination of your life to identify where you are living out of alignment. This isn't about changing everything overnight, but about getting honest about the cost of inauthenticity. Start with your career. Ask yourself, if money weren't a factor, if others' opinions didn't matter, if fear of failure wasn't an issue, what would you actually want to do with your working life? The gap between that answer and your current situation often correlates directly with your anxiety levels. Look at your relationships. Which ones require you to be someone you're not? Which ones drain you because you're constantly managing impressions rather than being authentic? Which conversations do you avoid because they might reveal too much of your true self? Examine your creative expression. What parts of yourself have you relegated to someday or not practical? What did you love as a child that you've convinced yourself you can't pursue as an adult? Your creative impulses aren't luxuries. They're expressions of your authentic self trying to emerge. Review your values versus your actions. Write down what you say you believe in, then honestly assess whether your daily choices reflect those values. The disconnection between stated values and lived values creates a constant internal tension that manifests as anxiety. But here's the crucial part. This audit isn't about judgment or immediate radical change. It's about awareness. Because you can't heal what you won't acknowledge, and you can't change what you refuse to see. The third practice involves what Jung called active imagination, dialoguing directly with your anxiety as if it were a wise teacher rather than a symptoms to eliminate. When anxiety arises, instead of fighting it, I literally ask it, "What are you trying to tell me? What do you need me to know? What are you trying to protect?" This might sound strange, but your anxiety has a voice, a wisdom, a purpose. When you start treating it as an ally rather than an enemy, it begins to reveal its gifts. Sometimes the anxiety is protecting you from betraying your values. Sometimes it's alerting you to relationships that require too much pretense. Sometimes it's trying to push you toward a life that truly honors who you are. I teach my clients to keep what I call an anxiety translation journal. When anxiety arises, write down what was happening externally, then ask what it might be trying to communicate internally. Over time, patterns emerge. You start seeing anxiety not as random suffering but as consistent guidance. Your body also holds profound wisdom about authenticity. Notice where you feel expansive versus contracted. Which activities, people, and choices make you feel energized versus drained? Your body knows your truth before your mind does, and anxiety often arises when there's a disconnect between what your body knows and what your mind chooses. The integration practices work because they honor anxiety's true purpose, to guide you toward authentic living. When you stop fighting the messenger and start listening to the message, anxiety transforms from your greatest enemy into your wisest teacher. This isn't about eliminating all discomfort or anxiety from your life. Some anxiety is appropriate. It's your internal guidance system working properly. But chronic, persistent anxiety often signals that you're living someone else's life instead of your own. Let me share what actually changed when I stopped fighting my anxiety and started listening to it, because the transformation went far beyond symptom relief. It was a complete restructuring of how I lived. Within 3 months of making this shift, I made the scariest and best decision of my professional life. I left a prestigious position that looked perfect on paper but felt like spiritual death, and started pursuing work that aligned with my authentic interests. The anxiety I used to feel every Sunday night, that crushing dread about Monday morning, simply disappeared. Not because work became easy, but because it became meaningful. My relationships transformed completely. I stopped being the agreeable person who said what others wanted to hear and started being someone who could be trusted to tell the truth. Yes, some relationships ended, but the ones that remained became infinitely deeper and more nourishing. The social anxiety that used to plague me in groups dissolved because I was no longer performing a character. I was simply being myself. For the first time in decades, I started creating again. Writing, which I'd abandoned as impractical, returned as a central part of my life. Not because I had more time, but because I stopped treating my creative impulses as luxuries and started honoring them as essential expressions of my authentic self. The physical symptoms changed too. The chronic tension in my shoulders, the digestive issues, the sleep problems. They all improved not through medical intervention, but through alignment. When your life and your soul are pointing in the same direction, your body relaxes into its natural state of well-being. But perhaps most importantly, my relationship with uncertainty completely transformed. I used to live in constant fear of the unknown, creating elaborate plans and backup plans to control every possible outcome. Now I understand that anxiety about the future often signals that you're trying to force a path that isn't authentically yours. When you're living authentically, uncertainty becomes adventure rather than threat. The clients I've worked with since making this discovery show the same patterns of transformation. Sarah came to me with chronic anxiety that she'd been medicating for 15 years. Through our work together, she discovered that her anxiety was directly connected to suppressing her artistic nature in favor of a practical accounting career. When she started honoring her creative impulses, even in small ways initially, her anxiety levels dropped dramatically. She eventually transitioned to graphic design work and tells me she barely remembers what chronic anxiety felt like. Michael experienced panic attacks that seemed to come from nowhere, especially during business meetings. When we explored what was happening internally during those moments, he realized the panic arose whenever he was about to agree to projects that violated his values. His body was literally trying to stop him from betraying himself. Once he learned to listen to these signals and make more aligned choices, the panic attack stopped completely. Lisa's social anxiety was so severe she'd stopped dating and withdrew from friendships. But when we dug deeper, we discovered her anxiety wasn't about social situations. It was about the exhausting effort of maintaining a false persona. She was so afraid of being rejected for who she really was that she'd created an acceptable version of herself, then lived in constant fear of being found out. When she started showing up authentically in relationships, the social anxiety transformed into genuine confidence. Every single case revealed the same underlying pattern: anxiety as authenticity trying to emerge, symptoms as guidance toward a more aligned life. Now I want to be clear about something crucial. This is not a one-time fix that eliminates all anxiety forever. What changes is your relationship with anxiety. Instead of seeing it as a disorder to manage, you start experiencing it as a guidance system to honor. I still feel anxiety sometimes, but now I recognize it as valuable information. When anxiety arises around a decision, I know to pause and check my internal compass. When I feel that familiar knot in my stomach, I ask what part of my authentic self I might be betraying. The anxiety has become my ally in living a life that truly honors who I am. This is what Jung meant by individuation. Not becoming perfect, but becoming whole. Not eliminating all discomfort, but integrating all parts of yourself into a coherent, authentic way of being. Looking back on those 20 years of struggle, I'm actually grateful for every anxious moment. Not because suffering is noble, but because that suffering was my authentic self refusing to be silenced. My anxiety wasn't my weakness, it was my strength trying to emerge. The person who used to lie awake at 3 a.m. consumed with existential dread now wakes early by choice, excited about the day ahead. Not because life became perfect, but because it became real. Not because challenges disappeared, but because they now serve a purpose aligned with my authentic path. That's the invitation waiting for you. To see your anxiety not as evidence of your brokenness, but as proof of your soul's unwillingness to settle for anything less than authenticity. So here's the invitation that's been waiting for you through 20 years of my struggle and thousands of hours working with clients. What if your anxiety isn't a disorder to be cured, but a calling to be answered. What if those racing thoughts, that knot in your stomach, those 3 a.m. wake-ups aren't evidence that something is fundamentally wrong with you, but proof that something profoundly right is trying to emerge through you? What if the cure you've been seeking isn't in elimination but in integration? Not in silencing the messenger but in finally listening to the message. Your anxiety knows something your conscious mind has forgotten. You came here to live as your authentic self, not as an edited version designed to please others. Every spike of anxiety, every moment of panic, every sleepless night has been your soul refusing to accept anything less than the truth of who you are. The shift I'm offering you is radical in its simplicity. Stop asking, "How do I make this anxiety go away?" And start asking, "What is this anxiety trying to reveal?" Stop seeing it as your enemy and start experiencing it as your inner compass pointing toward authenticity. Now I need to hear from you, because this isn't just information to consume, it's a transformation to live. In the comments below, tell me, what area of your life creates the most anxiety for you? Your career? Your relationships? Your creative expression? Because I guarantee you, that's exactly where your authentic self is trying to emerge most powerfully. If you've been living with anxiety for months or years and something in this video resonated as truth rather than just another technique, tell me about it. Share one way you might be betraying your authentic nature, one area where you're living someone else's version of your life instead of your own. And if you're ready to stop managing anxiety and start listening to its wisdom, if you're ready to transform your greatest source of pain into your most trusted guide, hit that like button and let me know in the comments. When you engage authentically here, you're training YouTube's algorithm to understand that you value transformational content that actually changes lives, not just surface-level quick fixes. Most importantly, if this message found you at exactly the right moment, if you've been struggling for years and something inside you recognized truth in what we've shared, please share this video. Share it with someone else who's been fighting their own inner wisdom instead of listening to it. Your willingness to be vulnerable about your journey gives others permission to begin their own transformation. For those ready to go deeper, I've created a comprehensive integration guide that walks you through everything we've covered today, plus advanced practices I couldn't fit into this video. You'll get the complete anxiety translation protocol, the authenticity audit worksheets, the shadow dialogue techniques, and the daily integration practices that seal this shift permanently. The link is in the description below. Download it now while this understanding is fresh and alive in your awareness. To continue building your understanding of how psychology, spirituality, and authentic living intersect to create profound healing, click on one of the videos appearing on your screen right now. I've carefully selected these to take you deeper into the work of transforming your relationship with anxiety and stepping fully into who you truly are. One video will show you the shadow work that ends anxiety forever, the Jung-inspired practices that help you integrate the suppressed parts of yourself that create internal conflict. The other explores how ancient wisdom cures modern mental health, revealing how traditional healing practices offer solutions that contemporary psychology is just beginning to understand. Remember, your anxiety isn't your weakness, it's your strength trying to emerge. It's not your pathology, it's your pathway. It's not your enemy, it's your invitation to come home to yourself. You are not broken. You never were. You're just living someone else's life instead of your own, and your soul is refusing to stay quiet about it any longer. Your transformation doesn't begin when the anxiety stops. Your transformation begins the moment you start listening to what the anxiety is trying to tell you. The 20-year journey that brought me here was worth every anxious moment, because it led me home to myself. Your journey home begins now.